Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, January 5th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The national championship game against Alabama is in 6 days. The game against Michigan in 326 days. But before we start looking ahead to the Crimson Tide, want to take a look back at the Sugar Bowl. And I'm sure most of our listeners won't mind hearing a little bit more about that game and why Ohio State was able to just completely demolish the Clemson defense like that. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop's X's and O's guru, Ross Fulton. Ross, last week we talked about how Ohio State would be able to attack Brent Venables in the Clemson defense. And from what I saw Friday night in New Orleans, it seemed like Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson might have been listening.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that they had a plan both for dealing with Venables' sign stealing, shall we say, or at a minimum, his desire to wait until the very last minute to signal in his defense so he could look at what the offense is doing, as well as the structure of, as we talked about going into the game, their Clemson's success last year using the 3 safety broken stack alignment.
Well, and, I think to a lot of people, it started up front and the offensive line was obviously very good. But what was it that the Buckeyes did schematically that allowed them to run the ball so effectively against Clemson's defensive front?
Yeah, I mean, part of it really was like by either doing that sugar huddle and getting quickly up to the line of scrimmage, or, they would signal in a play, they turn and snap it right away. A lot of times Clemson was not set, which helps run the football well. And then a lot of times, Clemson, because they wanted to do the 3 safeties and try to hide coverage, I guess, the offense had equal numbers in the box, which we've seen against just like Northwestern, what the Ohio State offensive line can do when it's able to block 6-on-6, not have unblocked defenders hanging around near the run game. And then Clemson, because they just, frankly, as we talked about before the game, weren't going to be able to match up man to man on the Ohio State offensive line. They slanted a ton, especially away from the running back. And so Ohio State just took advantage of that. They ran a lot of either wide zone or outside zone or the mid zone with the tight end blocking back, called split zone. And Trey Sermon, just like against Northwestern, is very happy to bounce the ball back. And so, the tight end would block back. He'd cut back in a huge cutback hole because the offensive line would just basically take those Clemson defenders the direction they were slanting and just keep on going. And when he'd cut back, there would just be really no support from Clemson because they had those safeties deep who would have to come up and play the run. And Sermon's running so well, both in terms of his vision and finishing off runs.
Well, there was something else I noticed while rewatching the game last night that kind of stood out. And then you wrote about it as well. And I was like, oh, good. Ross thinks so too. I must be right. That's good. Ohio State put 3 wide receivers. It's called the trips formation to the boundary, which is the short side of the field. If you're on the left hash, the left side is the boundary because you have less room over there, and the wide side of the field is the right side. That's the field. So they put 3 wide receivers to the boundary. So that's something I don't remember them doing a whole lot this year. So why did they do that, and how did it work?
Yeah, it's funny. So prior to the game last week, Seth Galina from Pro Football Focus, who is in particular an LSU fan. So he looked a lot at that game last year. He's like, what LSU did a lot of was put their best receiver to the field as a single receiver away from trips. And Ryan Day hasn't done that at all this year with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Isn't that kind of strange? And lo and behold, against Clemson, Ryan Day on I think like something like 20 to 30 snaps, put Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson as a single receiver. And a lot of times they do that too, as you said, the wide field. And then they put trips into the boundary, which again messes with this 3 safety structure because now you're essentially the offense is unbalanced, and that 3-3-3 is sort of a balanced look. And so Clemson would have to put several defensive backs into the short side of the field over those trips. And again, so then Ohio State wanted to run the ball towards the trips to the short side. And again, so when Sermon would bounce back, he's running to the wide field where there's very few defenders to help. And or if Clemson then did try to help, put a defensive back shading towards Olave or Wilson, then they had him outnumbered to the short field.
Well, and you one of the things when talking about the 3 deep look that Clemson was showing, you wrote that it was the exact quote you used was structurally unsound. So can you explain what was unsound about what Clemson was doing with that 3 deep look?
Yeah, in theory, what they generally do is it turns into a cover 3 with the the middle safety dropping to essentially be the deep middle, and then the corners become the deep cover three players, and those other outside safeties sort of come up into the alley. But the way Clemson was executing it, like all of those three safeties just were a lot of times bunched together. Like they didn't get enough separation. So essentially you're just essentially had one zone covered by three guys. And then the deep safety didn't really play like a deep safety should. He didn't get enough depth, and or he would just bite on things. They were just out of position a lot. And you could tell Ohio State's plan in the passing game was, even putting aside those schematic issues, just personnel wise, they clearly thought they had an advantage going after those deep safeties, both vertically with Wilson and Olave, but then also in the red zone with their tight ends.
Well, and another thing you wrote about was those safeties were at times were in kind of a no-win situation where, if they stayed back, Ohio State could run it. That was one of the things that kind of opened things up for Ohio State in the run game. And then they would creep up and they would just kind of take a shot over their heads, and that opened up a bunch of stuff in the passing game.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's obviously, complementary offense. And, especially as the game wore on, earlier in the game, Ohio State was running it well. They did hit the one early pass to Wilson, but it was much more of a run the football and sort of hit mid-range throws, working it in the middle of the field. But, they hit Olave and a couple of hook routes, and then curl routes, and they hit the tight ends. But then as the game progressed and the Clemson had to get more and more nosy trying to stop the run. And they did slow Ohio State down a little bit more running by putting more bodies at it. But then Ohio State was able to hit those shots over their head, the post to Olave and the one to Jameson Williams as well.
Well, and let's talk about that post to Olave. Like that was one of the biggest plays of the game. Why was he able to get open? I mean, you would think, Clemson's playing a very, if you're in like a 3 deep, you shouldn't have anyone getting way behind you. So how did he get so open on that play?
Yeah, so if people remember back when we talked about Ohio State versus Indiana, it was a very similar situation actually, where it was a play that's always been a staple for Ryan Day. So it's called Y cross, and it's a deeper crossing route. He actually runs it from the slot receiver, and so the safety, actually two safeties, came up to jump Garrett Wilson on that cross. And that left Olave one-on-one against a corner who has outside leverage in cover three. And so he beat him, and those safeties never had a chance to get back. And so, Fields, that was a good example of how well he played, because that's usually the third progression in that route. So he looked at the cross, he looked at the shot, then he went back to the post, and obviously made an amazing throw.
And then before the game, we had talked about the importance of them getting 7 points instead of 3 inside the red zone. I mean, that was something that came back to haunt them last year. This year, not really a problem. But so what were they able to do that they were able to score 7 so frequently in the red zone?
Yeah, this is one I probably wouldn't have guessed before the game, that they were going to be that successful throwing the football inside the red zone. I mean, so they had, I think, 4 touchdowns inside the 20 come all out of the passing game. And Clemson was doing a fairly effective job near the goal line, stopping the run, because they then would bring those safeties and play more of a cover 4 and have them come very quickly downhill against the run. But Ohio State was really effective throwing out of 12 personnel, which is just 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back. That probably gave Clemson a run key. And then, they were able to, I think as we joked during the game, this has been the long con of Ohio State, saving their tight ends in the passing game for decades, and only to spring them in the Sugar Bowl against Clemson. So, and it shows how effective they are. And obviously Fields made some great throws, but the one play obviously was sort of a trick play with the throwback on the leak route to Ruckert where he faked he was blocking. But the other 2 were just really well executed. And again, they targeted those safeties and went after them, fit in the throws before they could react to the football.
Well, as I mentioned off the top of the show, there are 6 more days until the national championship game against Alabama. I'm sure people are going to be dying for any and all Ohio State content between now and then. So why don't you let people know what to expect from you later on this week? Yeah,
so in addition to my article on the Ohio State offense versus Clemson, I'll have one on the Ohio State defense and what they did schematically and what adjustments they made to defend Clemson. And then I will have a preview of Alabama prior to the national championship game.
Yeah, this is Russ's article on the offense should be up, I think, sometime Tuesday. So maybe up by the time you're listening to this. So make sure you check that out at BuckeyeScoop.com. His next two articles should be must see TV as well. So make sure you check all of that out at BuckeyeScoop.com. We have had a ton of great content already. It's only Tuesday morning, and we have had a ton of great content already. Mark Givler dropped his Buckeye Scoop recruiting column on Sunday night. Bill Green wrote about why, who he's picking in the game and why he has had the same projected national champion since day one this season, and some really interesting reasoning behind his pick. So, and he put up his receipts from the casino. He is in for this. He's in it to win it. So he clearly believes what he's saying. So you can check that all out at BuckeyeScoop.com. We also had another, 2, 3, 4 great Nevada Buck Nuggets on inside Ohio State's preparation for the game. It's latest on Justin Fields, what Ohio State's thinking. It is an insane week already, and it's only Tuesday morning. So this would be a great time to become a member of BuckeyeScoop.com for $12.99 a month, the price of a lousy chain store pizza. You get a month of Ohio State football content like you can't find anywhere else. And boy, this seems like a week when you're going to be wanting to read as much Ohio State football content as you can. Might as well make it some good, insightful stuff. So you can sign up at BuckeyeScoop.com to find all of that. And also make sure you check out all of our podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. You know the deal by now. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. Subscribe right there, and also leave us a 5-star rating and review while you're at it. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. We will talk to you tomorrow.